Everybody can hear? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So, what I want to talk about, I want to finish up the discussion called Olam Gavar, very fascinating topic. And I want to talk about two interesting cases. And then I want to continue to the next Gemara, which is called Velech Zizuzi Mimanakat. So we'll finish a discussion of called Olam Gavar. So if you look at the previous Marmakomos before we make the transition, on the what we have here, it's probably on page 3, the Gemara Bava Basra Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Everybody have that? Bavli Bava Basra Lamed Hey Amud Beis? Okay. I'll assume the answer is yes. Um, yeah. Okay. So the Gemara says the following. The Gemara says, Amri Nahardai, very interesting case. So again, just to remind everybody, the case of Kol Alim Gavar is a case of two people who are um, coming to court and telling mutually exclusive stories. Ruvain, first fellow, says that a particular object belongs to him. And the other fellow says the same thing. So Ruvain and Shimon each is claiming that an object, it could be a boat, it could be anything, it could be some for land, it could be mobilia, it could be taltalin. Each one is making a mutually exclusive claim that he is the single and exclusive owner of this object, either inherited it or he acquired it, but that it belongs to him and to no one else. So, as we are aware, if no one is holding on to the object, that's going to most Rishonim anyway. So we say Kol Alim Gavar. Whoever is able to win the struggle for this object wins the object. And that's very peculiar. And we've been discussing the parameters of, this apparent might makes right idea, but it isn't so simple as we've seen. So the Gemara says about Vasserlam and Hamid Beis, this is again in the Marmakomos, we have this text. The Gemara says, Amri Nahardoi, Nahardoi saying, Ba echad min hashuk v'hichzik ba, ein motzin osa miyada. So this is a very remarkable case. Case is they have two people struggling over this object, each claiming that he is the single owner. And Bezin is going to solve this case by saying Kol Alim Gavar. Kol Alim Gavar means, again, whoever wins in the struggle between them, he will emerge with the object. However, before that happens, they're just at the claim stage of the Din Torah, of the court case. So then a third party, Levi, shows up and he grabs the object himself. So again, one more time. Reuven and Shimon are contending over an object, and Levi, a third fellow, just grabs it and he takes it for himself, even though the other two were vying for it already. So the Gemara says that in ba echad minashuk v'hichzik ba ein motzi osa miyado, we don't take it away from him. The Tani Rabchia, because Rabchia said that Gazlan Shalrabim Lav Shmei Gazlan, a person who steals from more than one person, he steals from a collective or from one of a number of people. So he's not considered to be a Gazlan. So of course that's very strange. What does that even mean? So let's go. We'll finish the Gemara first, and then we'll go back and dissect it. The Gemara says, Ravashi Amar Olam Shmei Gazlan. It's not true that you can steal, you know, um, you know, from one of a group of people. Meaning, if you don't know who you're stealing from, it's not true that you don't have to return it. It's not true. Umay Lo Shmei Gazlan. So, what is it? The phrase Gazlan Sharabim Lo Shmei Gazlan. What does that actually mean? What does it refer to? So the Gemara says Shalonitan Lehishavo, that it's not the kind of thing that you could, attain forgiveness if you return it, if you don't return it directly to the owner. So if you took it from a group, let's say, some sort of a collective situation, um, if you return it to that situation, you don't fulfill the mitzvah of the Heishiv Hagzela Asher Gazal, that you're obligated to return the stolen object. And since that is the case, so you don't get, the kapara, the forgiveness involved. You have to return the object, but you don't get the benefit of clearing your record once you do so. So that's what the Gemara says. So you have two opposite views in the Gemara. In a case where you have a struggle between two people, and you say, "Kol Alam," you're going to say, "Kol Alam Gavar," and then a third party usurps the first two, and he takes it for himself. So the first view of the Gemara is he gets to keep it. That's very remarkable. Why should he be able to keep it? The second view of the Gemara is no, of course he can't keep it because let's assume for a moment he's a Goslin, he stole it. It's definitely not his, not making the claim that it belongs to him. But nonetheless, there's a problem because if he were to return things to status quo, that, according to simple reading Gemara, that would not be enough. And therefore, he wouldn't get the benefit of trying to do tshuva and the kapara of returning the object. So we need to understand both of these positions. So let's talk about the first one for a moment. It seems like the first Man Damar in the Gemara, Nahardai and Reb Chia, are of the opinion, and that's how they interpret the phrase Gazlan Shel Rabim, Lav Shmei Gazlan, that a third party is legally able to just grab an object from the two people who are disputing it. And the question is, why? So the normative view, it could be that the Rambam and there's also a passage in the Mordechai that are against this. Not such a clear cut issue, but certainly the, let's say, larger consensus among the authorities is that in the following situation, what would happen? Let's say you have Ruvain, let's say, this man, and he says a particular object or piece of land, he says it belongs to me. As he says he's the owner, but he has no evidence whatsoever. Then you have Shimon, right, who is his antagonist, his competitor. And Shimon says, I want to take this object for myself. I admit it doesn't belong to me, but there's no objective evidence that it belongs to you either, even though you make the claim that you do. So you have Ruvain making a claim but not being able to support it. And then you have Shimon who's saying, as far as I know, it's Hefker. It doesn't belong to anyone. You claim it belongs to you. You got it from your father. You bought it. If you can't prove it, I don't accept that. So I don't want to give back the object, even though I have no claim that it was mine previously. So there's a question. If there's no raya one way or another, does a taina in its own right, which isn't proved, does it give an edge to one party over the other?
Isn't it Bori and Shema?
I'm sorry?
Bori and Shema?
It's a kind of Bori V'Shema, but not exactly.
So shouldn't the Bori win out?
I'm sorry?
Shouldn't the Bori win out over the Shema?
Well, first of all, it's a machlokus whether Bori V'Shema Bori Adif or not, and certainly in cases of muksakos. But here we're talking about a case where, this fellow, let's say he's in the property, or he has the object in his hand, and the other guy says it belongs to me, right? And he says, prove it, right?
But Bori Shema probably wouldn't work anyway if one is a muksuk, no?
Right. So I'm saying Bari V'Shema against Chazaka is really an argument,
right.
Number one. But also, this isn't the typical Bari V'Shema because here the point is that the Shema doesn't believe the Bari. Right. So again, there is a Rambam and there is a Mordechai that say that if the fellow says, listen, I don't buy until you prove to me your claim, I don't buy your claim, that he could do that and he could keep the object. But the majority view is that if somebody has a claim and the other person doesn't have a claim, we're going to give it to the person with the claim. That's the majority view of the Rishonim. So the question is, what about this case? In this case, we're talking about Reuven and Shimon are arguing with each other about who owns the object. We're going to paskin kol alam gavar, and then Levi comes and he grabs it before any of them have a chance. That's the case of the Gemara on Lamed Hamid Beis that we're just reading right now.
He's
How would
grabbing
there
it,
be a view, which
he's
seems to be
grabbing
the
it
view?
with a claim or without a claim?
So most Rishonim are the opinion without a claim, meaning without a claim of ownership. He's just saying,
So wait, just
I
a
don't
plain
believe
thief?
you guys, so I want to keep it for myself.
So he says it's hefker.
Yeah. So but normally we pass, and again, there's a Rambam, there's a Mordechai, but the general consensus is that if one person has a taina and the other person does not, we believe the person with the taina, even if the other fellow is skeptical. He doesn't have to believe him, but we believe him. But that's the fact that we give him an edge, put it that way. So why don't we apply that principle here? And there's the first man, the Amar says, in Bo'achon Nashuk v'hichzik ba, ein motziin oso miyado. Right, we're on the Gemara in Lamed Amud Beis. The Tanya Rabbi Chia, Gazin Sharabim Lav Shmei Gazlan. So the Rashbam says something very interesting. I should have put it here on the Mar Makomos, but I did not. So I'm going to read it to you from the Gemara itself. Why, if you don't hold like that Rambam and Mordechai, which that's the Sivos and the Poskim and
It's the
Shulchan Aruch speak
Gemara's
about that.
opinion that it's the
Why would
Gemara's
it be
opinion.
that we don't apply the normal rule that Habai Mataina is better than Shaloba Imatayna?
Is the Gemara's opinion that lechatchila he could take it, or that if he took it, you can't take it back from him?
If he took it, then you can't take it back
But
from
the
him.
lechatchila they would say that he had no right to take it.
Not so clear. Definitely, they're saying if he took it, that the first view,
Because that would make the question less strong.
a little bit, a little bit, but again, in the case of a real taina, almost all the poskim paskin that even if he took it, if he doesn't have a taina, he has to give it up. So what's different about this case? The answer is there's a simple difference, and that is in this case, it's true that Ruvain and Shimon each have a taina, but their tainas, their claims are contradictory. They contradict each other. There are two people with a claim, two people with a disputed claim, and then there's a third person with no claim. So if it was just Ruvain and Shimon, Ruvain had a claim. Shimon said, if you can't prove it, I don't accept it. So most of the poskim say we go with the person with the taina, and even Motzi and Miyado. However, in the case where the claim that is made by Ruvain is also made by Shimon, and each one of them is calling each other a liar, so when Levi makes his move to take the object even without a taina, the Gemara says that's different. So let me read to you the
But
Rashbam.
Levi's making a leap in faith because the fact that one of them is lying, we understand. Levi's assuming they're both lying.
Or at least he's saying that it weakens even more the claim because these are disputed claims, not undisputed claims.
But somebody owns it, no? Or the two.
Not necessarily the two of them, and not necessarily anybody actually, right? So this is what the Rashbam says. In Ba Echad Min Ashuk V'Hichsikba, listen to the language. B'Hach Karka, the Amrav Nachman called the Alam Gavar, Uba Zeh Shlishi B'Chadfa Me'ashnayim, right? Elo Hatonim Shalavosai. The third fellow grabs it from the two, each one who claims that it's his, but they're contradicting each other. Ein Motzi Miyado Bebezdin. Miyado shel shlishi, afal gav de lotoin midi, even though the third fellow is not claiming to be the owner, the shema gam lebeis harishonim elam chelek ba. Because since the two of them are calling each other liars, instead of having a typical case where we give the edge to the person with the claim, we don't necessarily give the edge to the person with the disputed claim, disputed meaning the other fellow is calling him a liar.
Well, in a way, we believe both of them when they say each one is a liar.
You could say it that way too, 100%. But in the end, we don't paskin this way, which is so fascinating, because the next line in the Gemara, again, going back to the Gemara again, the Gemara says, Rav Ashi Amar, no. La'olam Shmei Gazlan. Actually, the third party does have to give it up because, he doesn't have any claim and each of these people has a disputed claim, but still a disputed claim, still, or mi bein shneim, we probably believe the claim, maybe, right? So what does it mean? Lolam shmei gazlan, my lo shmei gazlan, shalonita li shava. Means he doesn't fulfill the heishiv sagzela asher gazal if he returns it to the state of kol alam gavar. Meaning, what happened here? Levi, the third guy, grabbed the object after there was already a dispute between Ruvain and Shimon. Did he grab the object from Ruvain? No. Did he grab it from Shimon? No. He grabbed it from a situation where no one was holding on to it and both of them were claiming it. And the Bezin was about to render the decision called Alam Gavar. So listen to the Rajbam. I'm going to read the Rajbam inside. Just listen carefully. I didn't put it on the sheet. The Gemara says, Ravashi Amar, La'olam Gazlan Shal Rabim Shmei Gazlan, Hoil Velotoin Midi. You have to take it away from him because he has no claim. At least the other two have a claim, right? But umotzim biyado, and therefore we confiscated from him. Umamidin osa bifnei shnayim harishonim sheyesh lem tainasav. Who do you give it back to? The answer is you don't. You put it in the middle, and you're about to pronounce. You're going to wave the bell or ring the bell or wave the flag, for the contest to begin. So the Rajbam says, "My lo shmei gazlan." So what does the Gemara mean when it says lo shmei gazlan? To come Rabchia lo lahakel olav ba lepotro milishalem. We don't mean to say that he third party can keep it, and that would be a kula, meaning we're saying the other two are arguing, so he can just keep it. No, it's the opposite. Ela lahachmir olav velomar lo nitan liyishavon lo mechaper bahashava. What it means is if he puts it down in the middle, undoing presumably what he initiated, that's where he stole it from, right? So is that good enough for the mitzvah of v'heshev esagzela asher gazal? So the way the Rashbam reads the Gemara, the answer is no, it's not. The eno yodeya lemi yashiv. He doesn't know who to give it back to. Doesn't belong to both of them. It belongs to one of them, and we don't know who. Once he has it as a gazlan, that ups his responsibility to return it to the right place, but he doesn't know what that right place is. If he were just to put it in the middle and then they would say, it's like he's giving it back to Hefker.
That's where he took it from.
Right.
He took it from. Why shouldn't he be able to return it to where he took it from? He took it from.
So what you're saying is what the Ramban says. I'm going to read you the line of the Ramban. Again, I apologize for not putting these on the Marmakomos. But this is the Ramban. Listen to the Ramban for a moment. The Ramban quotes the Rajbam, and he says, I don't understand what he's saying. He took it from a collective state. So his hashava is to a collective state, meaning, I'll read you the line, then you'll see what I mean. Gazon Shanita Lishavon, Pirush Harav Rabbeinu Shmuel, he quotes the Rajbam, She'im tafas mishnayim hamisamtsim ba, if he grabbed it in a situation where they were about to have the contest of Kol Alam Gavar, meaning it wasn't in the possession of either one of them, but it was claimed mutually exclusively claimed by both, or by each. Zeomer shalavosai, lo miftar bahashava. That's what the Rajbam says. If he puts it back where he found it, that's not good enough. Why? De'eni odea lemi yashiv. Because he's not getting it back to the owner. He doesn't know who the owner is. The eno rashoy lahafkida biyad shneim arishonim v'chol dalam gavar. This is the Rajbam. He can't just put it back to a state of kol dalam gavar. Kiramino le'el v'tafsina lamafkinan. So this is the Ramban. Now the Ramban is talking. The lo nearly, Ramban says, I don't think this is correct, what the Rajbam says. Shalo amru lo mafkinan elak hibrish Bezdin. If Bezdin were to intervene, Bezdin has an extra responsibility, and therefore they can't just put it back to a state of kol alam gavar. Meaning, we had this case, that's the Gemara earlier in Bava Basra. The Gemara says that if one of the parties, they're about to say Kol Alam Gavar, and then Ruvain comes to Bezin, he says, you know what, I'm going to bring Edom tomorrow, but I'm worried if Shimon, isn't stopped right now. So do me a favor, hold on to the object, and I'll bring Edom tomorrow. Then the tomorrow comes, and he can't fulfill his promise. So the Gemara says, "Itafas lo mafkinan." Bezin's not going to put it back to Kol Alam Gavar. So the Ramban says that's not a good example. That's because Bezdin has higher standards. So once Bezdin gets involved, they're not going to return it to a state of Kol Alam Gavar. But if somebody stole the object from a state of Kol Alam Gavar, right? Ein roy lahotzi davar rishusam, meaning Bezdin lemachlokas ad shivar davar. Aval echad shetafas mehem bigzela. But if a person steals it, imratza motzi mershusa, all he has to do is remove it and reverse what he did. This is the Ramban's claim. The Mishnah says later on in a mafkid, we saw this already. Let's say a person steals from one person among five, but he doesn't remember who he took it from.
He has to return to all five.
So the Mishnah says he has to give back to all five. But that's a different case. That's a case he went into somebody's private domain. He stole it from one person, from the real owner. He just doesn't know. It was in the middle of the night, whatever. He doesn't know who that owner is. So he took it from a private single place, and he can't just say, oh, it's one of you five, work it out. Because he stole it from an individual.
But we also have a simple.
Wait, just 1 second. But if he stole it, says the Ramban, from a state, a collective state of Kol Alam Gavar, why can't he just go back to that? Bezdin can't do that? That's because Bezdin is different. Bezdin has higher standards. Ulasham Yachsir. V'chein she'amru safek hiniach lo yitov v'im nata lo Yachsir. But there
actually should be a case that maybe, I'll take the other side of what I said before, because we also have a case where a shomer is given an envelope with $100 and $200 from Reuven and Shimon.
Right.
And both of them claim it's $200. Okay, and he made a pshia. He doesn't know who's who. He's got
but it's not a pshia. We're assuming it's not a pshia in that case.
He's got to return 200 to each, even though he's not a goslin. Okay, this guy now, by picking it up on the floor, he did an act of let's call it pshia, whatever you want to call it. Okay, it doesn't have to be a goslin even. He got himself into a hole. Okay, and now that he doesn't know who to return it to, maybe it's tough luck, like the case with the showman.
Right. So I would say the following. Let's say it this way. There's an argument, let's on the factual side first. On the factual side, what we're going to say is there's an argument between the Rashbam and the Ramban, right? Whether or not if you steal something from a state of Kol Alam Gavar, whether you can return it to a state of Kol Alam Gavar. Those are the facts. And that's how they interpret the Gemara differently. What is that argument about? The answer is it could be an argument about one issue, another issue, or maybe the overlap of both. Let me explain. So one possibility is it's a machlokas about Gezela and Hashava. And that's what you were just trying to say a second ago, which is, just like we say that if Bezdin picks up an object, right, because they were asked to, they can't just, return it to where it was. They become responsible to get it to the right place because Bezdin has a special stature and a special obligation. So too, it could very well be that when you steal something, the hashava is not merely to reverse your theft. The gezela makes you additionally responsible to make the person you stole from, even if you don't know who that is, and even if it wasn't apparent in the act of theft, maybe it's still part of the chiyuv hashava is to make whole the owner. Who says that it's enough? In other words, there could be two explanations for the Rashbam, and maybe both are true. The first explanation and the argument of the Ramban can revolve around those 2 points. One is that the argument is about Hashavas Gezela. The Ramban thinks that when it comes to, unlike Bezdin, a Goslin is only chayiv hashava to reverse his ma'aseh gzela. So if he stole the object in a collective state, then he has every right to return it to a collective state as well. And the Rajbam says that's not true. Just like Besdin has an additional responsibility. Now, in the case of Besdin, it's because of their high stature and you know, their public, role and persona. So anything that comes to them, they have extra obligation to make sure it gets
Rambam
back to
say
where
it's a
it should go.
knas.
But when it comes to a Goslin, for the opposite reason, they also have that obligation, meaning he took the object away from the owner, whether or not he took it, privately or publicly. He still has no right to take this object,
Is
and
this
it's
a
still
knas?
a theft. Kamishmai, the Rabbanu Shalom knows who the owner is, and the owner knows who the owner is, and the other fellow knows who the owner is too.
Does the
So
Ramban classify this as a knas?
no, 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 no. This is definitely not a knas. This is what the Rashbam might say. This is a din in Hashavas Gzela. Hashavas Gzela means that you have to, in order to reverse and get kapara, or at least neutralize the malchus, whatever it is, for your avera, it becomes a chiyuv achrayas to get it to the right
Just
place.
from Malamda's question, is this in order to be Mekayim the assay of returning it? Or is
Yes.
that something in the love of the Gazela?
Well, it's too new. I mean, this is a lava nitak lasa. The Heshivas Exela Shargaza, they're connected.
So it's a deficiency in his ability to be Mekayim the Heshivas Exela.
Yes. Which means that he is still in violation of Lo Sigzo. It's a lava nitak lasa or a nitak tashlumin,
Rabbi,
whatever it is.
may I say something? This is
Sure.
absolutely beautiful, Rabbi. What this is, this whole thing here. I translated into the letter Aleph, the
Okay.
two yuds on either side, and the Levi who takes the vav out of
And
the Aleph. The third man takes the vav out of the Aleph,
Uh-huh.
and because there are three functions here. Now, to return that vav into the Aleph, we have to
Got
have
me.
now what?
You already lost me a little bit, but it sounds good.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. My point is, thank you very much. And for my own self, I understand it completely. So
Okay.
thank you. That's I won't say anymore.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate the thanks. But you lost me a little in the details, but I think I
Well,
get the general idea.
there's three parties.
I got it.
There's a
Right.
positive, a negative, and an in between.
Well, there definitely is an in between here. That's for sure. That's the
Okay, well, let's
of our
go.
state. Anyway, so one possibility is Ramban and Rashbam are arguing about whether a Gazlan like Besdin has an added responsibility to make sure the object finds its home, even if he himself didn't initiate Gazela from that home, because he still is responsible for separating this man right from his object. So it's from that point of view, it's an argument in Hilchos Gezela and Hashava. However, there's also another point, and they probably overlap as well, and that is, how do you look at, and that's why I'm talking about it here, how do you look at Kol Alam Gavar? Meaning, we've been discussing this for a few weeks, right? The more you look at Kol Alam Gavar is what we call siluk, disengagement, an informal hesder, just kind of an arrangement how to move forward, but it's not a psak, it's not a din. The more you look at it that way, right? So the idea that you can't return an object to a state of kol da'alam gavar makes sense because basically you haven't done anything unless you think it's a chiyuv hashava, which we talked about just a second ago, right? But from the perspective of like you took it have you returned it? Have you done a chalos hashava to some sort of a legal state? There's no legal state of kol da'alam gavar. Kol da'alam gavar just means that we just don't know where it belongs, and we have a mechanism to reintroduce harmony into the system, even though we're not really, solving or legally, defining the solution. So if you look at it that way, what you could say is you might be very comfortable with what the Rashbam is saying, which is returning to a state of Kol Alam Gavar is meaningless. However, maybe that's where the Ramban disagrees. And the Ramban says that no, you stole it, meaning not, you know, you stole it from a state of Kol Alam Gavar, and that is a legal state because mi bein shneim, it belongs to one of the two of them, as will be determined, at least in the interim, by this process. So if we formalize that process, or if we recognize that as a legal process in any way, so then that's called, that defines the Gzela, and it very well may define the Hashava as well. So the argument may be not only about Hashavas Gzela, but about Kol Alam Gavar, and whether there's something called a chalos, let's say,
But
of
if you,
Kol Alam Gavar.
if you take that position, you have to take the position that if two people are arguing with something and it's Kol Olam Gava, not only do they have the right to see who gets it first, but any third party in Kol Olam Gava can come in and take it. Do we have that position?
No. In the position of the Maskana, we're saying a third party cannot. On the contrary, it's the opposite.
No, in trying to explain the Rashbam now, we said maybe Kol Olam Gava is a situation where neither.
Oh, you mean according to the Rashbam? So you might say that even though according to the
you would
Rashbam,
have to say that in a regular Kol Olam Gava, Reuven and
right,
Shimon
but it's
claim
still
a third party while they're arguing over it can come in and take it.
no. Well, that's the whole case that we're talking about.
But
Because they still, the two of them still, according to this second Mandamar in the Gemara, have have greater stature than the third party, because they have disputed Taina, but he has no Taina. So they're still superior.
So how
Now-
does it pay at the Kol Olam? In other words, if Kol Olam Gava only relates to the two people,
Yeah.
then what is the Rashbam saying?
No, so on the contrary, this is actually the response to the Resha. I mean, the Resha, Rav Ashi and Nahardai, they said something even more sensitive. They said, listen, the third guy can come and take it because, the other two fellows have a claim, but they are disputed by each other. So their disputed claim isn't strong enough. But the second Mandamar, the one who says that Lav Shmei Gazlan means that there's no kapara, he's saying the third fellow cannot keep it. He just doesn't get kapara if he puts it back in the middle. Why can't he keep it? Maybe the reason is because Kol Alam Gavar is a chalos, meaning because even though there's a dispute between the two of them, which undercuts some aspect of their taina, but mi bein shneim, if you draw a big circle around the two of them, between the two of them, they both agree that one of them owns it. So you could say, who cares what they agree? The answer is the law also seems to agree with that, because the law is providing a mechanism for one of them to emerge as at least the interim owner. So since the law is providing that interim ownership possibility, it means that the law is recognizing that the two of them have a yichus beyond the third. So what I'm trying to say is the second view of the Gemara, which is Rav Ashi, is already assuming that there's some aspect mi bein shnehem of Kol Alam Gavar. So then it's very interesting to note the argument between the Ramban and the Rashbam, because the question is like, how far do you push that? So the Ramban is saying, if there's something called a state of Kol Alam Gavar, the Ramban is actually saying two things. Number one, there's a state of Kol Alam Gavar, and number two, it's good enough even for Hashava. And the Rashbam is arguing about one of those points or both of those points. Either he's saying there's no state of Kol Alam Gavar, or he's saying if there is a state of Kol Alam Gavar, it still doesn't satisfy the obligation of Hashava. Or he's saying both of those things are true, and maybe for a similar reason. It doesn't satisfy Hashava because it isn't truly enough of a shame, a state of Kol Alam Gavar.
Does chazaka play any role at all? Do we say there's
No chazaka here.
What is a
Because
collective chazaka between the two of them?
So let me let me get to one more point. The Rabbeinu Yonah, who is the Ramban's cousin and the Rebbe of the Rajba. So as was the Ramban, but Rabbeinu Yonah in some respects even more. So Rabbeinu Yonah has remember when we talked about Levi, the third party, almost all the Rishonim are the opinion that Levi doesn't have any claim. And that's what we were discussing. The only one who argues is a Yesh Omrim quoted by Rabbeinu Yonah. Meaning, the way Rabbeinu Yonah reads the Gemara, according to the Yesh Omrim, is these two people are arguing about who owns the object. Right? Reuven and Shimon each says that they are the only owners. The object isn't being held by either of them. The Bezin's going to pronounce Kol Alam Gavar. Before that happens, Levi comes into the picture, a third party, and he grabs the object for himself. But he doesn't, instead of like all Rishonim saying he doesn't make a claim, he makes a claim. He says that the object belongs to me, not to those two. So that is the reason why the first man, the Amar in the Gemara says, Gazlan derabim lo shmei Gazlan, the ein motziin miyado, because he claims it belongs to him. So he's no worse off than the other two. That makes sense, except one thing.
Except he didn't make a proper claim.
Wait. There's only one problem with that, and that is, what's the chiddush? What do you mean he didn't make a proper claim? He made a proper claim.
Two guys are sitting before Bezin. They're making a claim. This guy comes in and disregards the Bezin and just takes it. He should have come.
Well, the Bezin didn't do anything.
He had a claim. He should have made his claim in front of Bezin.
He came a little late.
But he didn't even open his mouth.
He came and he grabbed the object. And now he's holding on to it. And he's claiming it's his. The problem with the Rabbeinu Yonah interpretation, it helps a lot in explaining, why you would say ein motzi and miyado. How could you say it's very difficult? According to the the 90%, view of the Rishonim, which is that the cases where the third guy doesn't have any claim that it's his, it's hard to understand how we can keep it. That's why I have to say, because the two of them are knocking each other out, so they have disputed claims. So a disputed claim is not better than no claim. That's difficult. But what the Rabbeinu Yonah is saying makes sense. He can keep it because he has just as much claim as they do. I came a little later. No. Right? The problem with Rabbeinu Yonah is what's the Hava Mina. Of course he should be able to keep it. So this is where Rabbeinu Yonah has a terrific line. Rabbeinu Yonah says the fact that Bezdin was about to pronounce Kol Alam Gabar is the equivalent of saying that between the two of them, they're muchzakim. It's like he's taking it from their collective chazaka. Wow. Just because the two of them are calling each other liars, but Bezdin is going to create an arrangement, a hesder between them that's going to give one of the two of them the object, that makes it that you would have thought that puts it off limits to a third party who has just as strong a claim? The answer is yes, if you think that Kol Alam Gavar, or getting to the point of Kol Alam Gavar, is a legal status, not a disengagement. If it's a disengagement, so what's the big deal? The third guy has just as much clout. He just has just as much going for him as the other two. But if you say that the fact that we were about to pronounce Kol Alam Gavar, is a way of saying that you draw a circle, we say Mibein Shneim Echad Mehem Abaylim. That's kind of what we're saying.
You sort of don't have to say that. I'm having a senior moment as to the phraseology, but the Gemara says that when you're ready to do something that's ready to be done, like you're ready to take off.
They say that in other meaning. Omed.
Why can't you say that about Bezdin?
Give me one second. I think I have my Rabbeinu Yonah right here. I guess it's a little bit of a Zoom advantage. I'm just going to read you the line of how he says that, because it is quite amazing, and he's the only one who says it. Here. One second. So Rabbeinu Yonah says the following. Odye Shlomar, he says, Divrei Nahardoi Kagon Sheba Echad Min Hashuk Betaina. The third fellow, Levi, who comes and grabs the object from the other two, he has a claim. He's not just grabbing it. He has a claim. Umishum Hachi, and therefore, according to Nahardai, Ein motziin osam yado. Shalo Tomar, why do you need to tell us this? That seems obvious if he has a claim, right? Why would he be worse off than the others? So listen to this. Shalo Tomar, hoil uba'u hashnayim tchila. It's almost what you said. Since the other two came to court first, the nifsak lahem adin, those are the key words. Is that what called alam gavar is? Is it nifsak lahem adin? Or is it a siluk, a disengagement? The answer is if it's nifsak lahem adin, the kol da alam gavar hare huchsak zehakarka leechad mehem. Between the two of them, it's as if there's a chazaka, a legal chazaka, not a physical chazaka, that applies to whoever the owner is, or between the two of them to one of the two. V'harei zeh kedin echad shereinu yo echad shehichzik b'karka shehichzik sham tchila shasada b'cheskas shalo o b'cheskas echad mishneim ve'in acher yachol lachzak bo kamash malon the kivin tadin kol dalam govar de'ena muksekas le'echad mehem. This is the Havamina and the Maskana, according to Rabbi Yonah. We thought that kol dalam gavar is in the legal system. It's a mechanism of, of not just disposing with the problem, but of really, it's an interim solution to the problem, and therefore, once Bezdin is assigning, kol dalam gavar is the solution, then between the two of them is a kind of legal muksakos, and then for the third party, even with a taina, won't work. The kamashmalan is that it isn't true. Shahare kamash malon the kivin shadin the kol dalam gavar the ena muksekas lechem be'em. Since in kol dalam gavar neither one is holding on. Shari afabi shiyard bozeh chaver motzim misham. This is even better. He says, if you remember, there's an argument between the Rosh and the other Rishonim if there's only one round, or you could keep going back and forth, back and forth. So the Rosh says there's only one round. Rabbi Yonah is assuming that's not true. So he says, the very fact that you could keep going back and forth shows you that this isn't the solution. This is an arrangement. And if it's an arrangement, the fact that he came a little late to the party, Levi, the third guy, it doesn't make a difference because he's not taking it away from anyone. Right? So that's why, says Rabbeinu Yonah, that's what the discussion in the Gemara is about.
What's a little surprising here, the whole concept of Kol Olam Gavar was to protect the sanctity and the reputation of the Bezdin. Okay?
Right.
So now, here you have a Bezdin sitting there, ready to make a psak, and the same Bezdin who were trying to protect them from being humiliated and the reputation for future generation, whatever it is, now we let this guy come in from left field. He ignores the whole Bezdin sitting, the whole process, picks up the stuff, walks out. I mean, I don't understand the...
No, because we're trying to protect Bezdin, and therefore what they're essentially, if you take the view that they're basically disengaging because we don't want to sully their
this is not a sullying of the reputation. Bezdin is sitting there on the top of the bench there in the black robes.
No, that's the point.
They're ready to make a psak, and this guy comes in and says, I don't care what you guys are doing. I'm out of here.
Right. No, they're basic. That's really what the two deos are. Meaning, are they giving it their imprimatur, in which case it has a kind of stature, and there's something called...
And especially if it's not siluk, as it appears from...
I know, but if it is siluk, that's exactly the point. But if it is siluk, it benefits their reputation because they have their hands, separated from it. So that's the whole point. That's what I call a hesder, meaning an arrangement, not a pitaron, a solution. And as such, it's understandable. So I'm going to give you one other case, which I think is very... Here the Ramban and Rajbam are on opposite sides. But let me give you this other case just for a moment. I don't have the Gemara in the sheet, so I'm going to read it to you. I'll try to read it in a way that you can understand it. The Gemara says in Bava Basra, another Gemara, earlier in Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. Listen to this. Zeomar shalavosai, Zeomar shalavosai. Right? Ruvain says this field belongs to me and I inherited it from my father. It's an heirloom. The other guy, Shimon, says the same thing, right? Both aren't true, but we don't know which is true. Reuven claims that the Sada belongs to him from Yerusha. Shimon says the same thing. So the Gemara says then it gets even more complicated. Hi, Isi Sadi Davase V'Achla Chazaka. Reuven is able to bring proof, witnesses that say that yes, this field belonged to his father, and that he himself lived there more than 3 years. Shimon is only able to bring witnesses. Hi, Isi Sahadi de Achla Shnei Chazaka. He can only bring proof that he's been living in the field for at least 3 years, right? But he has no evidence, no witnesses that will say that his father owned the property. Okay, so the Gemara says, Omer Rav Nachman uki achila b'hade achila uki ar b'cheskas avasa. If that's the case, what you do is you do like a mathematical operation. You cancel out the edim on the chazaka, and what remains is the edim on the inheritance.
Comma.
And that means Reuven has two sets of, he has two pieces of evidence, right? Shimon has only one piece of evidence. The common piece that they both have cancel each other out, and you give the property to Reuven, whose father, who the Edom claim, whose father owned the property. Okay, that's the background. Then the Gemara, and then the Gemara has a lot to say about that, but that's not for now. So then on Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, the next page, the Gemara says, that's all fine and good, but what happens if later on, right, Hadar, Isi, Sahadi, Davasehi. Let's say Shimon makes a comeback. He finds witnesses that will say that his father owned the property, right? So they took it away. Remember, they gave the property to Reuven because he had more clout. Now Shimon, evens up, the evidentiary, contest, right? So now they both have Edom on Shnei Chazaka. They both have Edom on
After the
Avase.
Pesach?
What do you do in that case?
Was that after the Pesach?
After the Psak.
Well,
So
then
the
the case
Gemara
is
says,
closed. After the
what?
Pesach. After the Pesach, the case is closed.
No, not if there's new evidence. You never close a case if there's new evidence. So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman, anan achtine, anan maskinan le. In this case, l'zilusa de bedina lo chashina. Meaning, when we had the evidence, we acted on the evidence and we took him, out of the property and put the other guy in the property. Now that we have new evidence, we're not worried about our reputation because now there's a good reason to change our mind, and therefore, we counter. What does it mean we counter? What's the case exactly? So here you have a very interesting argument.
It becomes a stalemate, no?
It's a stalemate, but what happens? So the Rashbam says here it's the opposite of what we saw before a little bit. The Rashbam says the following. One second, let me find it. Oh. Harei l'shnehem edei chazaka ve'edei avos. Now that both of them have equal evidence, right? The ein koach lezeh mizeh. Neither one has any stronger claim than the other. V'chol da'alim gavar. Kedam Rav Nachman l'kamam b'shmaitin. So therefore we'll say kol da'alim gavar. Okay.
And the original guy who won is not a muhsin.
Wait. So the case of the Rashbam seems to be a case where originally nobody was in the field. They emplaced Reuven in the field when he had more evidence. When the evidence was even, says the Rashbam, even though Reuven's in the karka right now, what you're going to do is initiate a kol da'alim gavar. Meaning you'll remove Reuven, even though he's there, But since he's there on the basis of extra evidence that he no longer has, you'll remove Ruvain and you'll initiate Kol Da'alam Gavar. So the Ramban, I'm going to read you the Ramban. 1 second. The Ramban disagrees with the Rashba.
When you say you'll remove him, that's only if he's stronger. He'll try to remove him. Kol
No,
Da'alam
no, no, no,
Gavar,
no. We're going to
you can't remove him.
No, no, no.
Sorry?
First, we're going to remove him, and now we're going to say Kol Da'alam Gavar. Then we'll ring the bell and we can have the tournament.
Yeah, but he has to win the Kol Da'alam Gavar. We say remove him.
Yeah, we'll initiate Kol Da'alam Gavar. That's the fact that he's there.
Yeah, right. But even if you initiate Kol Da'alam Gavar, you have to actually physically win.
Because we're going to neutralize the presence of Ruvain because that was unfairly implemented. And now we're going to start over again with Kol Da'alam Gavar. Okay?
Okay.
So the Ramban says, no.
In that case, it's forever a dispute. You can never solve it.
Say again?
You can never resolve the problem because he comes and then he comes. There is no concept of.
Well, that's what we're discussing. It could be that there's only one round. That's a debate. That's a debate. But let's go back to the Ramban for a minute. So the Ramban disagrees. The Ramban quotes Rabbeinu Hananel, who says that the case is a little different than the way the Rashbam understood it. The way the Rashbam understood the case is nobody was in the field. They placed Ruvain in the field when they thought he had more evidence, and now we're going to remove him and say Kol Da'alam Gavar. But Rabbeinu Hananel says that's not what happened. What happened was Ruvain was originally in the field. I'm sorry, the opposite. Shimon was originally in the field. Okay. They threw out Shimon when Ruvain brought extra evidence. And now they are going to remove Ruvain because now there's equal evidence. And since there's equal evidence, so they're going to give the object back to Shimon the way it was originally. However, if the case was the case of the Rashbam, says the Ramban, you wouldn't throw Ruvain out of the property in order to say Kol Da'alam Gavar, because Kol Da'alam Gavar is a siluk. So it doesn't matter that he got there, misguidedly. You're still not going to initiate in order to say, let me read the line, say Kol Da'alam Gavar.
Plus, Kol Da'alam Gavar doesn't exist with a chazaka.
Ulefi Pirush Zeh, says the Rabbeinu Hananel. I mean, he quotes Rabbeinu Hananel. Pirush Shahoisa b'yada shel echad mehem kishabo lebezin. Originally, there was somebody in the property. Shimon. Ve'eviu shekenegdo edim shalavosa. Then they threw Shimon out of the property because Ruvain had stronger evidence. Hotziyim b'yado. When he equalized the evidence, there's no Kol Da'alam Gavar here, says the Rabbeinu Hananel. There was an initial muksak. We countered that because we had incorrectly, assumed that there was stronger evidence. Once that was corrected, we go back to where we were to begin with, and Shimon's back in the property. Ulefi Pirazeh says, listen to the Ramban now. Ulefi Pirazeh, im lo hoisa b'rshus shalechad mehem, but let's say it was never in anybody's position to begin with. Kishabo lebezin tchila, afal pi shemosr biyad shalechad mehem, and then they gave it to Ruvain because he had more evidence. Kishiyavi chavero, right? Lemachar edim shalavosa, lo misalkina le lameimar Kol Da'alam Gavar. You're not going to throw out Ruvain in order to now initiate Kol Da'alam Gavar. Afapi sha'anu horadnuhu lazeh letocha shelo kadin. Even though the only reason Ruvain is there is because of an error, turns out, it doesn't matter. The kivan de dina de Kol Da'alam Gavar hu lo mizdaka kidan lahu. The whole idea behind Kol Da'alam Gavar is that Bezin's not going to engage in this whole discussion. V'lo nafka michas kasei. The high kivan shiyared babershus. Ulzeh dati nota. Aval harav Rab Shmuel, referring to the Rashbam, Kosav, lo nachzik ze yosem mizeh hol ve'edei shneim shavim, ein lo ze koach mizeh, v'omer demafkina mineva kol dalam gavar. Right? He says, v'kivin sha'inin kamot shamarnu al harav Rab Shmuel, lahavi raya demafkinan ara kol dalam gavar. He said, as far as I'm concerned, my argument is better. And the Rashbam owes us evidence. It's funny because the whole case of the Gemara, is when there's a conflict about how much evidence you have. So the Ramban is saying, my svara is better than his. If you want to go by his, read of the Gemara, you would need evidence, more evidence for that. Moreover, one other point, the Ramban says, in my opinion, Mikomokom kosher lai l'kaima, shalom atzina be'edim ve'edim, kol da'alam gavar, desveika daraisa hi. Braminan and the kaman, laminan kol da'alam gavar, elahecha de'ika l'meikam ala de milsa. Be'edim ve'edim leika l'meikam ala le'olamu. Tvei mahu deshuda. So there's one other point that he makes, which is as follows. I mean, the Rambam, based on this Gemara probably, when the Rambam speaks about kol da'alam gavar, he says that kol da'alam gavar could take place if each person makes a claim that they can't prove, or if each person makes a claim that they bring equal proof for. So if I don't have any evidence, or if we both have equal evidence, says the Rambam, you'll say kol da'alam gavar. However, and probably gets it from this Gemara, because this is a case where, according to the Rashbam's reading of the Gemara anyway, you're going to say kol da'alam gavar, even though they have equal evidence. They don't have no evidence. They have contradictory evidence. Says the Ramban, I think that's wrong. Why? Because we have a rule called treyu trei sveika daraisa. Well, it's actually debate in the Gemara. It's not clear how we paskin. The Ramban here seems to be saying we paskin treyu trei sveika daraisa. What does treyu trei sveika daraisa mean? If you have contradictory groups of Adim, right? So what do? So the Gemara in Yevamos and Ksuvos and a few places, the Gemara says there's an argument, Treu Trei Sveika D'Oraisa, Treu Trei Sveika D'Rabbanan. Treu Trei Sveika D'Rabbanan means that if you have a conflict between Adim, Trei Kameya, Hakasha, there's nothing you can do, except, let's say there's also a rove or a chazaka. There's some other mechanism to decide the case. So you could do that. That's called Treu Trei. It's a Sveika D'Rabbanan, and you could use a chazaka. However, the Mandamar Treu Trei Sveika D'Oraisa says if you have a conflict between Adim, we don't care about anything else. Everything else is eclipsed by that. You can have a rove, you can have a chazaka, you can have it doesn't make a difference. Once there's Treu Trei, there's nothing to do. Until you can find out that somebody's testifying falsely. That's called Treu Trei Sveika D'Oraisa. So the Ramban here says if you have contradictory evidence, if you paskin Treu Trei Sveika D'Oraisa, there's nothing more to do. So that would constitute what the Gemara in Bava Basra calls Leika Le'ukme Amilsa. But the Gemara says we only say Kol Da'alam Gavar when it's Ika Le'ukme Amilsa, when it's still possible that there'll be more evidence. But how can there be more evidence if there's a contradiction between the Adim? So the Rambam says for two reasons I think the Rashbam is wrong. Number one, you never initiate Kol Da'alam Gavar by throwing somebody off a property. He said, I disagree with the Rashbam on that. And number two, I disagree with the Rambam and the Rashbam and anybody who thinks that when there's contradictory Edus testimony, that you'll ever say Kol Da'alam Gavar.
You could have a situation about Zoma of one of the set of Adam.
Yeah, so that could happen, but the assumption is, you're 100% right. But that's still, the Ramban is arguing that that's still Leika L'ukma Allah de Milsa, because until it happens, you don't anticipate it. There are certain things in the halacha that like you go by the default, and it's
a far-fetched situation.
Yeah. So it's far-fetched, but in addition to that, it's also a legal concept, meaning when you have azama, so that's like a revolution. You know what I'm saying? And until you don't anticipate revolutions. When they happen, then you have to have the right. You have to know how to integrate them. but you don't anticipate, a revolution. So it's yeah. So what comes out of all these cases, and there are a few more, is some very fascinating debates about how we look at Kol Dalam Gavar, where we look at it as an extended, kind of a psak or a pitaron, a solution, something with the imprimatur of Besdin, and which gives status to the two parties, and which you can steal from and return from, and maybe even initiate into, or no, it's all just about disengagement. It's about just finding a way forward, but it doesn't have this, the imprimatur of Besdin as a solution or as a status, in which case, there are going to be kulas and chumras, as we've seen, but there are going to be, significant consequences. You're not going to initiate it into a call to alam gavar, and you're not going to, exclude other people because, there's an impending call to alam gavar. It's just a different, it's a practical methodology, to avoid paralysis in the system. Excuse me. But it's not, excuse me, it's not it doesn't have really the legal status and stature, that is required for some of these applications. Okay. So that's all I want to say about Kol Dalam Gavar. Oh, okay. So let's maybe just begin the next Gemara, so we can, start. So the Gemara here, then we'll start moving more quickly. These first topics are just very massive. The other ones are going to be massive too, but they're a little more manageable.
Not as fast.
Okay, so let's look at the next Gemara for a moment. So the Gemara says, "V'lechsi zuze mima nokat." This is the Gemara here. Let's in the middle of Beis Amud Beis. Hold on one second. This we don't have in the Marmakomos, but we have it on the in the Gemara, and we'll pick up with it. The Gemara here says, "V'lechsi zuze mima nokat." Everybody have that? The asterisk on Beis Amud Beis. 3, 6, 9, 10 lines down from 10 lines down from the bottom, from the top of the page. The Gemara says, "Lechsi zuze mima nokat." So again, the background is we have Shnai Moksem Batalis. We say Yachloku. The Gemara, we've seen this Gemara also, says that the reason it says the double language, is because our two cases. One is a Mitzia case. They're arguing about an object that they found. Each one claims, I found it, you didn't find it, it's exclusively mine. The other case is a Mekach Memkar case, meaning each one claims that he purchased the object from the original owner. So the Gemara says, well, if the argument is who purchased it from the owner, the Gemara says, Mekach Memkar, v'lechsi zuze mima nokat. Why don't we have a simple way to figure out who's telling the truth, right? Let's just see who's the one who the owner received money from, right? Says the Gemara, lo tzricha denokat mitravayu, michad midaite umichad bal korcha. So the Gemara says, the case must be a case where both of them really wanted to buy this object. So they both, threw down their money at the same time, and he received it from one of them, with the intent to sell, and the other one was kind of forcing his way in. Since he received money from both of them, so at this point we can't tell who he intended to sell it.
Sale involve seller and buyer having the das to agree to the sale, so Bal Karcha should fall out second place, no?
Well, Bal Korcha isn't going to be a proper sale but we're not sure who's the Baal Korcha and who's the
Oh.
Midaite.
Oh.
So, so the question is, what's going on there? It sounds like the Gemara is saying, or is the Gemara saying that we would believe if the mocher, if the seller were to make the claim that he knows who he sold it to, would we believe him?
Good. Why not?
So this goes to a Gemara in Kiddushin. If you look at the next Marmakomos, which we're going to be using going forward, where the Gemara says the following: Neman balamekach lomar lezeh macharti v'lezeh ein. A balamekach, a person who owns an object and sold it, and there's a dispute about who he sold it to, is normally believed to say, to identify, in other words, the purchaser.
Buyer.
The Gemara says, "V'nechse zuzim miman nakat," right? So the Gemara says, well, why don't we just figure out who we got the money from? Why don't we just see who gave him the money? So the Gemara says, same as our Gemara, lo tzricha denaka mitravayu. Amar chad midaite, v'chad bal karche. Two people tried to buy it at the same time, one trying to force his way, the other buying it properly. V'lo yadia he midaite v'he lo midaite. So originally,
Hold on, he kept both of their monies? I don't understand. How does that work? Meaning one tried to force,
yeah,
so he has to give him back the money.
he has to give back money, but he doesn't know. Either we don't trust him, or he doesn't remember, or we don't think that he remembers at this point, who's who. He can't keep both money, that's for sure.
Didn't we say a
Okay, I
minute
just
ago
wanted to
that
be
he
sure.
didn't know
Sounded
who
like
he
he was
sold it
keeping
to?
both.
Either way, money's half going back to each one, and they're half going to split the object in this case of Shnei Mosa Batalis. But so he's not keeping the extra money. But the problem is, it would be what we'd prefer is if he could be the one to identify, who's the full owner and who's the.
Didn't we say a minute ago that he knew who the owner, he knew who the person was he sold it to?
Say again?
Didn't we say a minute ago that he did know who he sold it to?
No.
Oh, oh.
We're trying to figure out whether if he knew or if he claims he knew, we'd believe him or not.
Yeah,
So the Gemara started by saying Neman balamekach lomar lezeh macharti lezeh ein macharti.
So what's the answer to that question?
One second. So the Gemara starts off by saying that a balamekach has special nemanas. Then the Gemara says v'lechsi zuzim manakan. Why don't we just follow the money trail? So the Gemara said because it's a confusing money trail because both gave money. So why don't we go back to the idea of asking him? Maybe you could. So we'll see in a moment. Just give me 1 minute. But I want to let me finish the Gemara. And then the Gemara says in Kiddushin, Neman dayan lomar lezeh zachisi v'lezeh lo zachiyavti. Similarly, a judge. Let's say a judge here's a case and he finishes adjudicating. He fines for whatever. Then they leave Bezdin, or then, there's a dispute. He said, oh, each one's claiming he won the case. So the Gemara says, we believe the judge to tell us who won the case. Then the Gemara says, B'medvar mamurim, shebalidinim om de lefanav. If the balidinim are still standing there. Aval ein balidinim om de lefanav. Once they leave the court, inonem.
Why?
Oh, 1 second. So the Gemara then says, V'nechsi zuzi man nakat. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That shouldn't be there. V'nechsi zchusa rather man nakat. Why don't you look at the at the actual physical written, ruling. So the Gemara says, "Lo tzricha dekriyas chusayu." Somebody ripped it up. Then the Gemara says, "V'neheder v'naydinu." So if you're really not sure, let him hear the case again. The Gemara says, "Beshuda dedaini." It's a case where the case isn't so definitive, and he had to use his,
intuition,
judicial prerogative. Okay. So what about this balamekach? Oh, so now look at Rashi for a minute, or I'll just tell you for a minute. The Tosefta in Bamatzia, that all the Rishonim quote, we'll see in a moment, say that Nemon balamekach lomar lezeh macharti v'lezeh lo macharti b'med dvarim amurim b'zman shemikcho biyado. When the object is still in his possession, the previous owner, but the other person is given the money, then at that point he's believed to say who he sold it to. But once the money leaves the hands of the mocher, he's no longer believed. That's what the simple reading of the Tosefta is. So this is Rashi. Look at Rashi. Zemacharti, im shnayim ma'orim ala mekach. Two people are disputing the ownership, like who properly bought the mekach. Zelmer machartali, zelmer machartali. Each one claims that it was sold to me. Right? The Kaman Muki lo sheshneim nosnu adamim, and later the Gemara will say that both gave money. Kol echad v'echad gave damim shleimim, echad midayta v'echad bal korcho. One forced it, and the other gave it, according to the will of the seller. So bisman shemikcho biyado, right? The Rami alei lemeidak. This is Rashi's view. I'll make it clear. The Tosefta and the Gemara say that we believe the Bala Mekach as long as the Mekach is biyado and not beyond. Why? So Rashi says the reason is because as long as the Mekach is biyado, Rami alei lemedak shalolachsar mizeh ulahachsar lodama v'yitin Mekach lemishalonim dekamle b'mishapara. Hilkach medak dayek. Aber bisman she'ein b'kobiyado shneim ochsin bo eino neman dekimin alav alei rami sulodayik lizkar lemihu.
What's his advantage to lie about this?
It's not a question that we think he's lying. Which question is, do we believe does he have extra nemanas or not?
Why wouldn't we believe him? Number one, without his das, it's not a sale.
This is not a Echad Neman B'Yisurim.
No, but without his das, it's not a sale.
Right, but he sold it already.
No, but he's the one to say who I had in mind to sell it to.
Right. So what Rashi's saying is, I'll tell you the three views very quickly, and then we'll pursue this next week. The way the Balitosis understand it is that the only reason, let me make it clear, that this Gemara in Kedushin says a dayan, a mocher, a chaya. Chaya means the midwife. Like, let's say the children are born in a hospital, right? And like the question is who belongs to who, right? So the Gemara says in Kiddushin that we invest special nemanus in the midwife, as long as the people are still there. If you want to come back to her 2 weeks later or even an hour later, we don't believe her anymore, right? But as long as the child has just been handed over and everybody's standing around, like the dayan and the mocher, bisman shemikcho biyado, we believe it. So this is a special neman. Let me make it clear. In these areas, this is not a echad neman b'Yisurim. These are not Yisurim, right? Defining who a child is has impact in terms of Yerusha and many other things. Who got the money in a din Torah is a dine mominus, case. You need edus for that, normally. Who bought the object and therefore who owns the object, right? You need evidence if there's claim and counterclaim. So it's a chiddush of the Gemara that people in a special position to know a dayan, a chaya, a mocher, right? That they are given like extra credibility to establish what normally witnesses would have to establish. That's point number one. However, the Tosefta says, and the Gemara partly recreates this in Kiddushin, but there's a limitation in that special nemanus. It only applies, let's say, in the case of mocher, bisman shemikcha biyado. It only applies in the case of dayan, right? Kishabale dinim omdim lefanav.
Why? Well, why does it stop? Why does it stop? Why is it like a statute of limitations? Why?
Right. So that's a great question. The question is the right question to ask, why does it stop? Or is the bigger question?
Why does it start?
Exactly.
No, the question is,
So listen to this.
are we
So the Balei
concerned?
Tosfos say the right question to ask is, why does it start? Well, why does the Mocher and the Chaya and the Dayan, why do they get to give, why do they get to leapfrog over other people?
I assume because they have credibility. That's why it starts.
Wait. So the Balitosis answer is no, it's because they have a migu. They're in a position of strength. Each one could basically do what they want and create the result that they want. And therefore, since they could do what they want, that gives them, it's migu de iboy. The mocher could say, I'm not selling it at all. Right? So,
One second. The mocher can say he never sold it. The other guy has it. He just say he's a thief.
we're talking about Bisman Shemikha Biado.
Oh, the mocher still has it in his hand, so he could say.
This is what the Balitosis say.
Money.
The Balitosis say the reason that it's only Bisman Shemikha Biado or Bisman Shomi B'fanav, etc. Here, look at Tosis for a minute. We have it in our Tosis too, on the spot. But we'll look at Tosis and Kedushin for a minute. 1 second. I'm just going to skip, and I'll read it more next time. L'chein Pirush Rabbeinu Tam. It's 3, 6, 3. 1 second. 3, 6, 8 lines down in the middle of the line. L'chein Pirush Rabbeinu Tam. Everybody have that? Tosis Masachet Kedushin Ayin Gimel Amud Beis. 8 lines down in the middle of the line. L'chein Pirush Rabbeinu Tam. Bizman shemikha biyado azu neman mitam migu. Dematziyom lo macharti. He could say I didn't sell it to anybody, and we'd believe him because it's his. It was his. We know it to be his.
And he's holding it.
And he's holding it. Oh, chazarti v'kanisa. He'll say, you know what? I sold it and then I rebought it. I had nostalgia and regret, so I bought it back, and that's why it's in my hands. Aval ein mikcho biyado eino neman to ozlo shayich migu. So really, for Tosis, the question is, why do we believe him at all? The answer is because he has a migu. So he only has a migu when it's in his hands, right? Uparich lexi zuze manakat nei nami de mikcho biyado my neman. But we'll get back to it. But Rashi disagrees. Rashi says the other way, the way Jacob said it, which is, why shouldn't we believe him even afterwards? Why do we believe him? So we'll say, why? Because he has knowledge, he has expertise that other people don't have. He's in a position.
He has credibility. He has credibility.
That's not a question of credibility. I
don't know if he has credibility, but he has
to know. It's a factual.
He's a specialist. He's the only one who can know this.
It's a factual issue.
So what's that?
It's a factual issue, and he's the one that was involved. He or she.
But the point is that he is distinguished in his. The way Rashi says it is Rami. Rashi says a little bit differently. Rashi says Rami alei lemeda. He's the responsible party. It's his job to know.
Is a time lag issue the fact that after a period of time, the concern is that he really forgot, but he's ashamed to say he forgot or he doesn't know, so he makes up something?
For Rashi, I don't know about the shame part, but Rashi says, as long as he is the responsible party, so he makes sure, to know. Like he concentrates very hard. He doesn't, until she hands over that child, she's not going to make a mistake. Until the Dayan, finishes with the Balei Dinim in front of him, he's going to be super, cautious. And the same thing is true of the Bala Mekach. That's what Rashi says. Go back to Rashi for a minute. Rashi says, Bisman shemikha biyado derami alei lamedak. At this point, it's his job to know. And therefore, he pays special attention. Shelo laksolo, because if he doesn't know, he could get involved in what we call a mishapara. right? The kom label mishapari hilkach medak daik. Abuzman shein bikol biyado shnei mochsin bo eno neman kivin dalav alei ram. At this point, it's not. It's past history. Sulo dayak lizkar lemihu. So Rashi's view is the opposite. Not Rashi's saying like this: he's in a position to know more than anybody else, and therefore we give him more credibility. However, that's only true as long as he's the responsible party. The second that it's recalling history rather than implementing his job. So at that point, he drops the intense effort to be Medak Dayik, and he becomes a regular person. The language of the Tosefta is after Ein Mikol Biyado anymore, Areu Kol Adam. And Kol Adam isn't enough in this case. You have a dispute, a monetary dispute. You need real evidence. There's a third possibility. And that is, it's not, just about memory and responsibility, but it's about bailos, but not migu. It's more like we said before, and that is not that, he could do what he wants and therefore he's in the driver's seat and therefore we believe him. It's more, he is the expert. He is the, person who stands out. He's the specialist. How long does he remain the specialist? Only as long as he's doing his job, or even further. So, by the way, this is what led Rashi in Bava Metzia and in Kedushin to come to the following conclusion. Rashi says, if there are two monies that were given, so in that case, we don't think that he, is focusing so much once it's ein mikol biyado and it's not his responsibility. But since it's about his special knowledge, if there's only one, exchange of money, says Rashi, we do believe him, even if ein mikol biyado. Why? Because the problem is our Gemara in Bava Metzia. After all, we're talking about Shnayim Ochazin Betalis. If Shnayim Ochazin Betalis, then it's not in the hands of the Mocher, right?
People announcements today. Number one, for everybody who's online, February 12th, virtual series with Rabbi David Kasher.
Oh, there's something else.
Everyone go on mute, please.
Okay. Anyway, so we're going to stop here either way. So just to sum up, we're going to pick up with this idea next time. In the Gemara in Kedushin and in our Gemara Bava Metzia, the point is that normally the rules of nemanus, of credibility, are mostly low plug. They go across the board. If you need two witnesses, you have to have two witnesses, and so on and so forth. We do find in the Gemara in Kedushin that a balamekach, a mocher, a chaya, a dayan, we also find a father's ability to identify his children, a mother's ability to identify her children, slightly different rules, that there's a special nemanus that is accorded to these people who are in an unusual position, right, to know. The question is that limited to the equivalent of Bisman Shemikcha Biyado when they're in a position of power? And either way, they could get their way, and therefore that adds credibility to, or at least power, which leads to greater credibility. Is that the idea? That's Tosas's idea? Or is it about the extra responsibility, right, as a professional to do your job, to know this? That's Rashi's idea. Rashi's much more flexible. Or is it something in between that's just as I say, a certain specialized status, that we encounter? You don't need the migu, but it's also not just about responsibility and memory. There's a fourth possibility that we're mostly going to discuss, and that's the position of Rabbeinu Tam in Bava Metzia. Rabbeinu Tam in Bava Metzia suggests that when we say that we're going to believe the mocher, we don't mean we're going to believe him completely. It means that we're going to believe him as an eid echad, as a single witness. And that means that he will be able to impose a oath, a shvua d'oraisa, on the other party, and possibly exempt the person whose side he's advocating from a shvuah as well. It's called Eid Echad Misayea, is he poter min hashvuah. We know that in Eid Echad, a single aid is mechayev a shvuah. Is a single aid also exempt the party that he's supporting from taking an oath or not? So that's the big issue that I want to get into in Yirtzeh Hashem
What
next.
kind of oath would this be?
Okay, so everybody have a wonderful week, and we will continue with Eid Echad Misayea and Velechsi Zuze, and then we'll start after that talking about Daf Gimel and Dalid. The Gemara is about Motiv and Miktsas, because all the Shavuos Gemaras begin here in the next few topics.
No.
Okay,
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
thank you all, and have a great week.